So there's been a lot of discussion about the pricing of AMD's new 9070 and 9070 XT. Specifically, how the 9070 is just $50 cheaper. And a lot of people assume that AMD was just wanting people to spend more on the 9070 XT. Well, I'm here to tell you that's not why. And the reason I know that is kind of a happy accident. Oh, and if you haven't seen my review on the 9070 XT, you definitely want to check that out. So as you can see here, this is the card that I have. This is the 9070 Steel Legend OC Edition. But this is not the card that I was originally given. Originally, the card I was given was not Steel Legend. It was a completely different GPU. It was a base model, not an OC model, but they had a recall on it. Don't worry, it was only very early models. I'm sure if any made to retail, they recalled those as well. So I wouldn't be concerned about getting something that's recalled or anything like that. But regardless, they sent this one over to replace it. And like I said, this is an OC edition. Now, when I got these and began testing them, we still did not have information on pricing. So when I was testing these, I found, and I'll show you this in just a second, but I found that the performance between them were really close. I mean, it's pretty wild. So I actually emailed them wondering, is something wrong? Is there some issue that I have with one of my GPUs? But then when the pricing was released, I was like, oh, okay, so that's why. Well, I also got an email from AMD that even more clearly explained it. So what apparently happened is that the 9070 XT sits on the lower range of normal performance. Now, for those who may not know, there's something called a silicon lottery where basically you have these specs that are required to make this GPU the GPU. You know, the number of compute units they have to have. Like, for example, the 9070 I have right here in front of me, it has to have 56 working compute units. It has to be able to reach certain frequencies, things like that. But some silicon is just better than others, and it's able to get even higher. Well, my 9070 XT, which you'll notice is also Steel Legend, but it's not an OC version, is apparently on a bit of the bottom of their expected performance. Don't get me wrong, it still performed what they would expect out of a 9070 XT, but it's just more on the lower scale of that. On the other side of this, the 9070 OC version, they said, is very much on the high end of that scale of what they would expect performance-wise, even from an OC version. Basically, what this did was it ended up showing performance just unbelievably close. Now, let's talk the actual performance here. So I'm looking over here and we're talking Tomb Raider, we're talking 206 to 212 FPS, Far Cry 6, 190 to 190. And in fact, the 9070 actually beat it on minimum frames, although that's like the absolute minimum frame. So that doesn't really tell you too much, especially because it did lose by a whopping 1 FPS in maximum 205 to 206. Dirt 5, we're talking 179.7 versus 182.7 average frame rate. So very close. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of these, there was at least a little bit of a difference. We're talking maybe 10% or so. Like, for example, F1 2023, we're looking at 233 FPS versus 252. Then let's say in ray tracing, we're looking at 98 versus 111. But then ray tracing with Far Cry 6, we're looking at 165 versus 163. So yeah, I mean, these are really close. That right there, I think, really shows why exactly they actually have it at just a $50 difference. Now, don't get me wrong. This is, of course, the OC version. So that would be more, it would probably be around, if not more than the base price of a base 9070 XT. But for any of those who really like to overclock or things like that, I mean, so when we look, you can see the regular 9070 right here. It comes with 56 compute units versus 64. But then the really big difference, we're looking at boost frequency of 2520 megahertz versus 2970. But then when we look at the OC version, we can see up to 2700 megahertz. So maybe, as long as these haven't been bent or anything like that, maybe, just maybe, if you get a regular base model 9070 and overclock it, you might be able to get around 2700 megahertz. But of course, a lot of this is dependent on the silicon lottery once again. The reason these are really so close is because the 9070 XT is a non-overclocked model and it's the lower end of what they expect, while the 9070 is an overclocked model and it's of the higher end, even the higher end of the overclocked models of what kind of performance they would expect. But essentially, these are very close GPUs in terms of performance, especially when you get a mismatch like what I did. So yeah, that was just a quick little story that I wanted to kind of cover to sort of show you that, don't count out the 9070 just yet. And don't get me wrong, we will have to see how well the base models overclock over time and things. So maybe a lot of the base models can get to the same performance with some manual overclocking if you're comfortable doing that, but maybe they can. Maybe this is just really like a best of the best, but at the same time, you might get a lower end 9070 XT if you get it, and then you get a higher end 9070 if you were to get that, and maybe that wouldn't be worth the $50 price difference. I don't know, but regardless, I thought that this was pretty interesting, so let me know what you think down in the comments below. And if you liked the video, please subscribe and give it a thumbs up. And as always, have a great day.